Hello, everybody. Welcome to the beginning of Top Cut here at the Orlando 2017 Pokemon Regional Championships. My name's Gabby Snyder.
My name is still Adam Dorricott. It has carried over from yesterday. Not changed yet. I'm still convinced I'm going to change it at some point today just to catch you off guard.
I'm waiting for it. I'm honestly waiting for it. I'm also sick and tired of waiting for our top 8 matches.
Yeah, we've been here waiting for them a little while now. We've got everything set up. We've got all 8 of our players ready to go. And we're going to be streaming all 7 games of this Top Cut this morning.
Oh my god. I think we've never done that before, right? I know we didn't do it last year.
No, we definitely didn't do it last year. We also had a player go missing for finals. So hopefully you'll get 7 complete matches today. And you'll be able to follow these players all the way through and see how their play develops as they match up against different opponents. Obviously, you'll learn a little bit about the teams, and everyone at home can learn and just follow their players that they really like to see.
Yeah, speaking of learning about their teams, I think before we need to, know the team, we should probably know the players a little bit. So tell me a little bit about Will and Nick.
So actually, both of these players, they break our kind of dynamic that we were going with yesterday in that we have, Florida versus out of state, and they are both Floridian, actually. So these are the only 2 players from Florida remaining in the tournament. Florida's last hope to try and get a win in our own regional. First up, we have Nicholas Yaroma. He's been playing VGC for about a year and a half. His favorite Pokemon is Mamoswine. He has the username Mighty Mamoswine online, so should be fairly obvious. Very local, lives in Orlando, actually.
Oh, wow, so not a long trip at all for him.
No, a very short drive, and this has actually been his breakout regional. This has been his top performance at regionals so far in his sort of history of playing, so really good to see him in the top 8, and I'm sure he's going to want to push on and add a win to that. I mean, if you can really make your breakout performance as big as possible, go for the win.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one thing I want to call out that's interesting is I was talking to him a little bit yesterday. The team that he's running today, he actually ran at last year's Florida Regionals, which was his first regional. And he's kind of taken the time to develop it and grow with the team, get practice with it. And I think it really shows. So I'm very excited to see, he's basically perfected this over the past, what has it been, 6 months? 8 months?
A little over that, I think.
A little over that.
Probably about 8 months. And I like when players do that. I genuinely do. They take their team, they see how it does, see how it fares, and then what they do is they sort of adapt it to the meta game as the meta shifts. So maybe it was the wrong call way back in February, but now it's the correct call.
Oh, definitely.
We've seen the players adapt to what's going on. He's seen the teams come out of Worlds, seen some teams from Arizona, and he thinks, okay, I still think that team can do really well. So nice of him to stick with it. We do also have, before we get into the game, we have Will, another local player, been playing VGC for 5 years. But he's not quite as local. His hometown is actually Hollywood, Florida. So a little bit of a drive, although he does live up around this way. So I'm excited to see how he does. I think it's been a while since Will really pushed in and had a big performance like this. Obviously, back in 2015, he top 4'd the Florida Regionals. So it'd be nice to see him push on and see if he can better that record.
Definitely. So with that being said, I think it's time we should start talking about these teams while these players get ready to go into team preview. So, I think we should start with Will because I think his team is kind of what people are, used to seeing given today. It's Kyogre, Xerneas, Raichu, Hitmontop, Amoonguss, and Salamence. Sort of a very safe team. Certainly one that looks like it might have been inspired by Wolfglick's, World Championship winning team. Whereas now that we have it on screen, our friend Nick here running something very unique. Shiftry, Gastrodon, Yveltal, Groudon, Salamence, and Crobat. I think everybody at home is saying, wait, what?
I think that's what I said when I first saw this
I
team
know
yesterday.
it's what I said yesterday.
I heard murmurs of it in the event hall, and I was like, oh, what's going on here? I wonder what we've got coming up next. And then I saw it on the team sheet and went, oh, that's real. He's actually doing that. I do like what he's doing here. You look at the restricted pairing in the Groudon Yveltal, and then you think, what could benefit from both of those? Well, you've got Shiftry. It has Chlorophyll potentially to use the sun to boost its speed, and obviously if it's carrying Dark-type attacks, well, they're going to be boosted by Dark Auras. So both of his restricteds trying to set out for this Shiftry, and it'd be interesting to see if Will has answers to it. I think the Xerneas on Will's side, we don't often see the Xerneas and the Kyogre together, but I think in this matchup, they could be a really potent pairing.
Yeah, unfortunately, we do not see that Shiftry as a lead, but we do see the Gastrodon, which is very exciting. Gastrodon and Crobat on Nick's side of the field versus Will's Hitmontop and Salamence going for that double Intimidate, not really helping him out much here.
No, nothing on the field is really too concerned about getting intimidated. I think a very safe start from Will there, not quite sure what's going to come out. Wants to be able to have his restricted in the back to catch Nick's restricted as they come in. Interesting to note, though, I talked a little bit at the beginning of the game about both of the restricteds benefiting Shiftry. With Nick's leads, he can't have all three of them, so he may have just bought both his restricteds and left Shiftry on the bench, or he may, of course, just bought one to really push on with the Shiftry.
Yeah, Crobat starting this game off with a quick guard to prevent Hitmontop from faking out the Gastrodon. Salamence going for a Hyper Voice. Doesn't really deal any damage to Gastrodon. Crobat sitting at a lovely maybe 50% HP. Ice Beam from that. Gastrodon getting the knockout right away on Salamence.
Yeah, I think a very smart turn there from Nick. He obviously quick guards to avoid the fake out, and that Will just didn't quite read into that. I think Will maybe forgot that there was a quick guard availability on Crobat. We do see a lot of the Crobats throw out Tailwind, so that misplay on Will's part of the field really cost him. He needed fake out to stop the Gastrodon, and he gives up his Salamence pretty much for free right off the bat. So
yeah,
not the best thing for him to lose to begin with.
Not the best thing at all. We do see him send in Xerneas, though, so this might be his attempt to kind of regain that momentum and maybe set up Geomancy. There certainly isn't anything on the field that threatens that play right now.
No, the only thing that can really stop it is the Crobat. We don't see the Crobat try and stop it, though. We do see the Crobat go for the Tailwind, so even if Xerneas gets the boost, which it's not going to, that's how you match it.
Yeah, instead we see Xerneas going for a Dazzling Gleam. Doesn't deal a lot of damage. Close combat into that Gastrodon, though, for the knockout.
Yeah, very smart turn. Both players got a little bit of what they wanted there. Of course, we see Will taking his first knockout of the game on the Gastrodon. We're not going to see anything more of it. Close combat, just doing enough damage to it to knock it out. And just Xerneas coming in, not throwing out the Geomancy, which I think is very interesting. We've seen over the course of this weekend, Crobat has a number of ways that it can deal with a Geomancy and Xerneas. It could be taunting it. We saw some haze yesterday. So maybe a very smart play on Will's part not to fall into that trap and try and get the Geomancy set up. The only problem is now, Nick obviously did get the Tailwind up for free. He didn't lose very much. Crobat's still on the field, able to superfan things. And Salamence now comes out as by far the quickest thing on the field. Going to be able to put huge pressure on that Hitmontop. And without the Geomancy boost, may actually be able to not get knocked out by an offensive attack from the Xerneas.
Yeah, it certainly depends on how that Salamence was trained. If it's a little bit more defensive than other Salamence we've seen, or maybe it's really defensive because Nick just switched it out, instead setting in his Groudon. So we are going to see that we only got one of Nick's restricted Pokemon in this game. It is the Groudon. The Sunlight will be set up on the field, so not going to make a difference this turn, but if Will has that Kyogre in the back on his team, certainly will allow Will potentially to get some more offensive pressure, especially if we see it switch in now. Hitmontop leaving the field, and yes, we do see the Kyogre take its place. So despite Nick's effort to get the Sunlight up, we are going to see Rain Supreme for the beginning of this battle. Kyogre again with that beautiful primal ability. It has that Primordial Sea to cancel out any hope of having Sunlight on the field right now. Super Fang from Crobat into the Xerneas. It will connect, and thanks to its ability, it will deal exactly half damage to it. Dazzling Gleam does a little bit of damage to that Crobat and Groudon, and that's the end of that turn.
A really solid turn there for Will, I think, actually. He does, of course, take a lot of damage on the Xerneas, but that switch is absolutely fantastic. He's read him like a book there. He knows Groudon's coming in, and it's going to be coming in first because the Salamence was going out. So to very safely bring in the Kyogre, get the Rain set up, now he puts Nick on the back foot slightly. The momentum definitely sits with Will. Groudon's likely going to have to leave the field sooner rather than later. So he can maybe take a turn, predict where that Salamence is coming back in, and really punish the switch from Nick here.
We're going to see Xerneas switch out and instead Hitmontop taking its place. This is definitely an attempt to intimidate that Groudon if it is physical. We don't know that for certain yet, but sometimes in this situation it's better to play it safe than sorry. Crobat going for a Super Fang onto that Kyogre. It's going to deal massive damage and potentially put it in KO range here. Earth Power from Groudon connecting with Kyogre. It does not knock out. Kyogre just barely hanging on. Will retaliate with an Origin Pulse. Does it connect with that Groudon? It will, and it gets the double knockout on both Crobat and Groudon.
Yeah, I was getting concerned at the beginning of the turn that Crobat was just going to be allowed to sit on the field and Super Fang over and over again. We've seen the raw amount of damage that Super Fang is doing, and that was Nick's way out. He needed to really get rid of that Kyogre, so very wisely, he does double into it there. He goes with both the Super Fang to bring it down to half. He shows the Earth Power on his Groudon, so probably going to be one of those special varieties. And we kind of see how the specially trained Groudons struggle a little bit with Kyogre. Kyogre is such high natural base special defense, really struggles, and we're just going to see the forfeit come out from Nick there to keep some information safe, I think.
Yeah, that's interesting to me though, because that Hitmontop was at full health, but it certainly resists any of Salamance's attacks. Kyogre was barely hanging on, and I believe the Xerneas as well had taken some chip damage at that point. So it might have been possible for Nick to eke out a win there if he were to have played it through.
Yeah, there was definitely a way out for him, and I think maybe it's a little bit foolish of him to not try and gather some information. We didn't see much from the Hitmontop, so he might have been able to grab a little more information. I mean, he can probably guess what it is and theorize based on what we've seen, but in the end, I really like what he's done with just, not going for that. I think a little more information gathering could have been wise for Nick there, because every bit of information in game 1 and 2 of a best 2 out of 3 can really help. So I'd be interested to see if Nick changes it up in this game. We do have his team up on screen again, of course, the Shiftry, the Gastrodon, the Yveltal, the Groudon, the Salamence, and the Crobat.
Yeah, and again, for those of you just tuning in, Will is running Kyogre, Xerneas, Raichu, Hitmontop, Amoonguss, and Salamence. I think if I were Will, I'd probably bring the same Pokemon and just hope for the best.
Yeah, Will did really well there. He did, of course, bring both his restricteds, and we didn't see both restricteds come out of Nick. We just saw the one in the Groudon, and when Nick caught him off guard, he brings the Groudon in. Will looks at him, you've activated my trap card, here comes Kyogre. So, very smart play, and with just the one restricted, your damage output is limited, and I feel as well, the way the teams are trained, the way that both these Pokemon have raised them after they caught them in-game, it's just going to be a little bit harder for that Groudon. Even if Groudon does win the Weather War, it's going to struggle to actually beat out Kyogre in a one-on-one situation if it ever comes down to that. We saw the Earth Power didn't even do 50%, nearer probably 30, 35. So very tough for this Groudon. This Groudon's going to have to be sort of babied through into the end of the game and see what it can do there.
Yeah, I think honestly Gastrodon is the key to giving Groudon the support it needs. We'll just have to see if Nick saves it for later, and we do. At least he's not leading with it this time. Yveltal and Crobat out on Nick's side of the field against Hitmontop, and Salamence out on Will's.
Yeah, so Nick maybe seeing what he did in game 1, didn't work out, does go for the change. Will just kind of sticking with what worked for him. Even though he lost the Salamence turn 1 last game, he does stick with it. Maybe predicting Nick to switch. Usually when players lose game 1, they think, I've got to change my mind, like it didn't work for me, so they force themselves to switch. The winning player, though, can do one of two things. They can try and predict that and bring a better lead, or they can just stick with their lead, and assuming that's the one they think can actually beat out the existing lead from his opponent.
Yeah, I mean, that double Intimidate could really hurt Nick here, though. Some Yveltal run special moves, some Yveltal run physical moves. If it's holding Sucker Punch or something like that, it could certainly be detrimental in just completely destroying its damage output. We see a feint, interesting enough, from that Hitmontop into the Yveltal, followed by a Tailwind on that Crobat. I don't think I was expecting a feint first turn. Hyper Voice into both Pokemon. It's not going to deal a lot of damage, and U-turn from the Yveltal. So rather than switch out Yveltal, himself at the beginning of the turn, Nick decided to use U-turn, attack that Hitmontop, and interestingly enough, activate that eject button. So we'll see a couple of switches here. Oh, no, we won't. We will not see a couple switches. We see that Xerneas come out on Will's side of the field, so certainly a great play there, allowing him to get that type advantage up there. As I just learned, if you turn into a Pokemon with the eject button, it actually doesn't allow you to switch.
Yeah, it's a very interesting mechanic. If you hit the eject button Pokemon with such a move, they get to go out because of eject button. And of course, you're stuck in. So Nick, seeing there that the Yveltal wasn't in a safe position, didn't really like staring down the Salamence, has been intimidated twice. So looking at the fact it uses U-turn, could be a set that relies very physically orientated moves, and now Will actually gets a huge momentum swing as he gets to bring something in. In this instance, he just gets to bring Xerneas in for himself, so a really solid turn there, and I feel that item just has another use that most people don't catch when they thinking of how to build their teams.
Yeah, U-turn was a very interesting choice, I think, though, because that's not really a move you see often on Yveltal, and we do see it using it again, interestingly enough, targeting that Xerneas after it takes a Super Fang from Crobat. This time, it's able to successfully switch out, so we'll have to see. Maybe Nick's changed up his plan a little bit after, seeing that Hitmontop switch out and seeing the Xerneas switch in. He's going to send in that Gastrodon. Salamence finishing up this turn with another Hyper Voice.
Yeah, and what we...
Oh, actually, I'm sorry. I completely forgot the Xerneas. That Dazzling Gleam gets the knockout on Crobat. And honestly, thanks to that crit, it looks like Gastrodon is in range for knockout now.
Yeah, it should be by one of these spread moves coming out of Will's side of the field. But the one thing I'd really like to touch on here is what Nick's Vettel is holding. We do see it go for U-turn twice in a row, and it could be that it maybe just wanted to get off the field so badly it had to go for U-turn twice. The other theory, and it's kind of up for Will to guess this one, is what item could it be holding? It's also very rare in general that we see U-turn on a Vettel, so one could potentially theorize that it's made a choice on how to play this game out and picked an item that reflects that.
Wow, foul play onto that Salamence, dealing massive damage, but not enough for a knockout. Gastrodon barely holding on, Yveltal barely holding on. That Dazzling Gleam from Xerneas, though, will score the double knockout.
Yeah, very safe, and Gastrodon's now off the field, so Will, assuming he has it, is very free to bring in his Kyogre and just kind of punish that way. He does, of course, have the Pokemon advantage in a fairly significant way, so we don't even see the Groudon as the last Pokemon from Nick either. We do see again he's just bought one of his restricted, and I think, it looks pretty much doomed, especially with that Xerneas on the field for Salamence. So Nick's tournament run could be ending here.
Yeah, it's unfortunate for a team that relies so heavily on two, I'm assuming primarily, Dark-type Pokemon in that Shiftry and that Yveltal. I would have hoped to see a couple more Xerneas counters from Nick. It certainly is one of the most popular Pokemon in the metagame right now.
Yeah, that was definitely, I think, something Will would have looked at last night while he was reviewing in his hotel room. What can this team do to beat? I mean, they all had a little bit of information. We do see a large Hyper Voice come out from Nick's side of the field, though.
We do, and we're finally going to see the Geomancy from Xerneas on Will. I think he realizes Tailwind is about to run out this turn. Xerneas can use that speed boost to outspeed Salamence and basically ensure the knockout next turn, bringing him on to the Elite Four, if you will, of the Florida Regional Championships this year.
Yeah, will actually be our first member of the Elite Four, so very, very good for him, and a very decisive win as well. I love the way he played this game. He knew what the win conditions were at all point, so I think that's going to give him a lot of confidence. He is, of course, going to have a tough matchup coming into that Elite Four. He plays the winner of the number 1 seed versus the number 8 seed, which is Luis versus Wolfie, I believe.
Yes.
So, assuming he proceeds, it's going to be a tough one. But if you're going to go for that big Cinderella story and knock out a world champion potentially, then yeah, you're going to need to start with a very solid, comfortable win.
Yeah, and I'd just like to point out, he used Feint on Hitmontop again this last turn, just to ensure that, that Salamence might not eke out a couple protects just for fun, and ensuring that he wins this game 3-0. So congrats to Will. He'll be moving on to the Elite Four here in Florida, and congrats to Nick too. Going from having a not-so-hot Florida Regionals run back in February and coming back here, using that time to revise your team to make it the best it can be, and then getting top 8. That's quite an accomplishment.
Yeah.
I think he should be very happy of what he's done here today.
Yeah, I think that's
and
a
yesterday.
testament as well to people playing locally as well. We don't see as many people talk about it, but if you play on your regular Premier Challenges and you come out to smaller events, then yeah, you are going to get better at the game. And Nick turns up to those kind of events, learns what his team can do, and just improves. So, lot to take away from him here. He's still early in the season, very capable of pushing on. He does go home with a really sizable portion of championship points already.
Definitely.
So he'll feel good about himself. But Will Collins moving into the top 4, the Elite Four, as we're calling it down here. And, he's going to be pushing on for even bigger prizes.
Yeah, so congratulations again to both of these trainers. I believe we'll be back shortly with an interview with the winner, so please stay tuned.
Welcome back to our stream of Florida Regionals here in sunny Orlando today. I believe it's a little bit sunny. I'm joined by Will Collins, the winner of our last round. How do you think that round went for you, Will?
I think it was really clean. I specifically brought Xerneas today for the Yveltal matchup, so I think I really lucked out in getting a top 8 match against an Yveltal.
Yeah, was there anything, obviously we saw it, the team preview was a little bit wacky, there was a few things in there that we weren't so sure on. Were you worried by either of those things, perhaps the Shiftry or the Gastrodon?
I was really scared about the Shiftry. Not so much the Gastrodon, I figured strong spread moves could whittle it down, and it didn't pose an immediate threat to anything other than my Salamence, as we saw in Game 1. But the Shiftry, under Sun, it outspeeds both of my Fake Outs, and I can't redirect it with a Moongus. It can knock off my Power Herb off my Xerneas, so it was sort of an immediate pressure threat that I didn't have a solid way to deal with.
Yeah. Of course, you do have the Salamence, which can kind of help, if you can, and you have the ability to change the weather. I really liked as well in Game 1, where you called the Groudon coming in. Was that an intentional prediction?
Yeah, I was like, well, there's 2 Pokemon he can bring in right here, and it's either the Groudon or the Salamence, because I think those were his best matchups, and I just went with my gut. If he went with Salamence, I could just Ice Beam it with Kyogre, and if he brought in Groudon, I'd reset the weather, and I'd be able to Origin Pulse him.
So a bit of a win-win turn on that decision. Tell me, let's go over your team a little bit.
Yep.
What made you pick the Kyogre and the Xerneas core? We don't see it that often, but what lent you towards that?
So I specifically went with Kyogre Xerneas because here in Central Florida, a lot of people have been on Yveltal and Groudon or Kyogre, and I feel like playing Kyogre with it gives you the best matchup against both of those teams.
Yeah, we talked a little bit on the stream actually yesterday about how Yveltal was really popular down here, and it was a bit of a matchup between the primals, but it seems you made a good pick. What made you go with Salamence as your mega Pokemon here?
So Salamence gives you fast, reliable spread damage. You can do upwards of a third of Groudon's health with a Hyper Voice. It outspeeds a lot of threats. You can double edge things to get chip damage. It has Intimidate. It's immune to Precipice Blades. There's a lot of things that Salamence brings to the table that old staples like Kangaskhan just don't.
Yeah, that was my concern, is I see a lot of people still sticking with the Kangaskhan, but this tournament in particular, I feel there's been an exceptionally large amount of Salamence. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. Anyway, we're setting up for our next game. We're going to have Ashton versus... I can't remember who it was Ashton against, but...
Adrian.
Adrian, there we go. I couldn't see from where I'm sitting. But they'll be playing to see who next advances into the Elite Four. We're going to cut to a very short break for this one. So we'll be right back in a couple of minutes.